Good morning, and thanks for joining us on Condo Solutions every Monday from 9 to 10 o'clock. We talk about some of the issues that impact you in your condo or homeowners association, some of the things that you may be dealing with that maybe you're new to condos or new to homeowners associations in Florida, not familiar with some of the things that happen, maybe not familiar with the law and the rules and regulations, or maybe just how it's accounted for or what it is and how it is and all those kind of good things. So we're here to help you with that. My name is Mark Breckville. I'm a local CPA, and I'm a licensed community association manager. And so I've been dealing with the condo world for a number of years now, both from an accounting, audit, tax, and from a property management standpoint. I have had the fortune to good fortune to be able to work with the state and my FICPA, my Florida Institute friends in this industry for a long time, and I'm on their statewide committee, and it's a great industry, but it does take some understanding, and I know it's frustrating, and I give a lot of credit to the people who work in this business on a regular basis, the property managers, the attorneys, and of course the board members and the officers that deal in this industry, because it's very difficult. We're large corporations in effect, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of revenue, but it's your home, and all of the issues that come up that are personal are business issues as well, and many of us know that in the business world that the toughest business issues are the ones that are also personal issues for somebody. So when you're dealing with a business that's all personal issues, because it's all about your home, it makes it a very, very difficult time sometimes if you're trying to look at some of this and don't fully understand it. So we're going to talk about some of those issues and some of those things where it is a community service program. So you're free to call in at 220-9788, 220-WSTU here in the studio, and we will be happy to take the call. By the way, that number, usually just store that in your phone or save that and write it down. That's the number here for most of the shows in the studio. So, and many, many, many of them are call-in shows or will accept calls. So write that number down if you've got a question. It's also a good number to get a hold of the station if maybe you've got a news item or something's going on traffic-wise or whatever. 220-9788, 220-WSTU. Normally, my friend and associate Peter Mullengarden is with us. Peter is an attorney, and he's had years and years of experience dealing in the area of condos and homeowners associations. He was out of town this weekend and got delayed, I think, so he's on his way back. But in the interim, we'll deal with the questions, and if I haven't come across these questions before, I'll be happy to. We'll get his opinion on it. Again, just as a caveat on those questions, I'll just mention briefly that, we'll give you the best answer we possibly can, but we do not have documents, so we don't have a way to know exactly what the situation would be for you based on your documents, because those documents can change the answer. Remember that documents are the overriding document that cover everything, and then the law kicks in, and then we have of course, your articles of organization and your bylaws and your rules and regulations. So a lot of times we think about the rules and regulations as being the governing, but they're actually the lowest on the totem pole in terms of authority, but they still are, they still carry weight. So it is still a situation where, they're important. The other thing that I would mention is that you on these things, for that reason, we'll give you the best answer we possibly can based on your interpretation of those documents and based on the law. We caution that we don't need your association name, and in fact, it makes it a little better if we don't have it for a number of reasons. One, and the most prevalent reason, is that people tend to tune out if they don't hear their association. They think it might not apply to them, and as many of you know that have listened for a long, long time, the problems are very similar in communities, but so we try to answer those questions for a broad number of people. And sometimes we'll talk a little broader on the answer or a little beyond your particular problem because we want to let some other listener who may not have the exact but a very close problem deal with that. So we try to do that as well. And we do need a name, but it doesn't have to be your actual name. You give us whatever name you want. We'll be happy to talk to you about your particular question or issue. And I want to thank the listeners who have been with us. We've been doing this for about 16 years now. And I want to thank the listeners who have been with us. We've had, of course, listeners come and go as people move in and out of the area and go in and off of boards or whatever. But we do appreciate you listening, and we appreciate you telling your friends about it. And we also appreciate your questions. And those of you that do call in and ask the question, we appreciate that. It helps the others who maybe are a little shy about calling in on the phone and talking on the radio. And so, we appreciate you helping them out, and I know they appreciate it. And Mike will take your call. Mike Thomas will take your call when you call in. And if you got something you don't want to go on the air, if you want to just, give him, some basic information, or if it's just a basic question. But normally we like for you to ask the question and stay on so that we can follow up, if you have a follow-up question or any additional items. So keep that in mind. Again, 220-9788, 220-WSTU is the number in the studio, and we'd be happy to take your call. We've got a lot of things going on right now, and we've talked about this for months now, but a couple things is that I want to just talk about a couple general things since Peter's not here right now, and until we get a question. But I do want to talk about some things that we've talked about on the show in the past, but just reemphasize. And we talked a little bit about it last week. But make sure if you're buying into an association, you know what kind of an association you're buying into. Because a lot of times people think that by looking at the association, they think that they know what kind of an association it is. And I tell you, it is very, very difficult. As Peter mentioned last week, the only thing that's different or that is legally you have to, if you're selling airspace. So if you've got a multiple story building and you're selling a unit on the floor of one of those buildings, the only thing that can be is a condominium or potentially a co-op. But in general, under Florida law, you're going to be looking at a condominium in that situation when you're talking about airspace. And again, in the co-op situation, you don't actually own the unit, you own stock in the corporation. But we'll talk about that. We got a call. Stanley, go ahead.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm good. How about you? Did you survive the rain?
I'm getting better. Yes, I did. Yes. I have a question that essentially involves confidential and privileged information.
Okay.
I understand the very clear definitions of what cannot be discussed, pending legal and personnel matters. That being said, we have a situation where our liability carrier declined to renew. And in that instance, it caused a whole series of steps and actions that needed to be taken, which ultimately resulted in our having to acquire excess and surplus liability.
Okay.
And under that circumstance, it has generated a great deal of questions by the membership of the association. Now, is that confidential and privileged information that cannot be discussed? Can the membership understand or be told or know what happened, or can they not? That's the question.
Okay, good question. The answer to that question is kind of broad, but it is pretty specific in that from a practical standpoint, you're right. There are a couple things that you are allowed to exclude from an open discussion, and generally they're in two major areas. Broadly, legal issues that are covered by client privilege with your attorney, and personnel issues. Um, those issues are generally also protected, particularly if they also relate to health. But and just from a practical standpoint, those associations should make sure when they keep their records internally that records of meetings that are related to that are segregated from the general minutes or the general meeting notices, and even in terms of personnel files, that if there are any sensitive personnel documents, that they're excluded from the basic personnel documents, because people do have the right to know certain information, personnel, salary, and things like that. But to get to Stanley's question, this is the thing. What happened, the people have a right to know. They should know about it. It wasn't the board's fault. It's just something that happens sometimes. That's what happens in business. And it does happen. But now, if as a result of there not being any liability insurance, there was pending litigation, then the information relative to that could be segregated, and could be handled in a confidential manner. But in general, just a discussion of liability or potential liability is not something that would be protected necessarily. Now, if you had this period of time where you had a gap, um, and or you have some sort of uncovered position as a result of the insurance you've had to put into place, then and there was an incident that occurred or had potentially occurred, even if there's no lawsuit filed, you don't have to have a lawsuit involved for there to be protection. But if there, it can be potential lawsuit. Now, here's the issue: is that you can't. And I've seen some associations do this from time to time. They'll just call their attorney into the meeting and say, "We're going to have the attorney there, so we don't have to open it up." And then they discuss those issues. Well, of course, I'd leave that up to the attorney to decide, assuming they know the law and stuff, which most of the attorneys that practice in this area do. And with any kind of an issue like this, there is some latitude there. Some of this is going to come up to the judgment of the particular attorney as to whether or not this meets the definition under Florida law of being, a lawsuit or potential lawsuit. But in that case, they're not going to just let you go into a private session to discuss an issue, because someday there could be a lawsuit. There has to be a closer tie to that. It either has to be a litigation issue where you might be talking about settlement, or there is an incident that's occurred and there you want to discuss strategy if the person files. Now, in the situation that you talked about, Stanley, if for example you were going to meet with the attorney, the board was going to meet with the attorney to discuss what the liability is for that period of time, and what types of things might be covered or not covered, and what the association might do if a claim is filed for that period, that probably would be something that could be protected, because you're laying out basically a case for somebody to sue you. And so I think that would probably meet the definition. But just the fact that it happened is not probably going to be enough to.
Well,
go ahead.
Let's suppose that as a result of that action of having to change insurance, the attorney said you have to close the pool down. How would that information be necessary to be explained to the association or not explained when you issue a dictate that says we're closing the pool down?
Well, again, if for example, there is an exposure because the liability policy doesn't cover a commercial pool, now you guys, I know you guys walk that area between residential and commercial, but so if for some reason or another the current policy they've gotten um, maybe has exclusions, and so as a result of that, potentially they may have it may be a situation where the attorney advised until such time as we can get this covered, there's too much liability on the pool to allow it to be open. That's I'm just guessing here, but I mean that I
Yeah.
could understand how that could be, like I said, there could be a closed door meeting where the attorney is advising the board on uh, places for potential claims while this was taking place. And the attorney is saying, okay, here's the thing. You have gaps in coverage here, 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 and here from your previous policy. And we're not able to cover those yet. So this one, there might not be much chance that there's going to be a lawsuit on this. There's might not, not on this, not on this, but this having the pool unclosed or hot tub or something like that, too much of a risk. Maybe you should close the pool down temporarily. Now, that's common area. And, for the board to do that, that's an amenity that is probably pretty well protected by your documents. So, for the board to arbitrarily restrict access, there would have to be a pretty good legal reason for that. Either a claim or potential claim or some problem with the pool that would lead to a claim. Maybe it's not fenced correctly. Maybe there's some issues with it that the board needs to affect first. For the board to permanently close down that, it would have to be in more of an emergency situation and without the members' approval.
Right.
But even on that kind of thing, it's if you're going to take that action, and if assuming there is no pending claim, and you're just taking the action going forward, then to me, I still don't understand why that couldn't be discussed with the members so that they would understand why the pool was being closed. I don't think anybody wants to take that kind of risk. But
understood.
Yeah.
My point being that if I was standing at the pool and members were approaching, and I, as a director, said, "I'm sorry, you can't use the pool right now," I can't tell them why. I can't explain. Is that the situation that the directors or the association officers are placed in?
It may be, but they always can explain. They could always say that we've temporarily closed it for security reasons or maintenance reasons or whatever, and they could just use general terms so that they understand that it's not being permanently excluded. But for example, if it was being closed because, and even then, the fact that the association is trying to protect itself from a potential liability, that's not a problem. The purpose of closing off discussions with attorneys are to protect the association from having a public meeting explaining exactly what they're willing to pay. Really, it's negotiation stuff. The cities do the same thing, and the counties and things. When they have a issue, whether it's related to a legal settlement or whatever, they have the right to go into executive session and pull out of the Florida Sunshine Laws because of that very reason. I mean, it's not fair to the city or the county if you go in and say, "Hey, look, I think we could settle this for a couple $100,000. I think our exposure on it's $1 million." Well, you can pretty much bet that the attorney for the other party is going to come in at $1 million and stay there because they know that's what the exposure is. So that's what it's there for, is to protect that kind of discussion that boards have to have from time to time to know what and to advise the attorney what they want to do. Do you want to go try to settle it for $200,000, or do you want to take our risk in court? And if your attorney says, "I wouldn't take the risk in court because you're going to lose because here's why," well, you really don't want the other party to know that because it kind of messes up the negotiation. So that's really what it's designed to do. Sometimes people skirt this a little bit and try to skirt it a little bit, and that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is not to protect it so you can just discuss whatever you want. So this liability issue with the insurance is kind of interesting, and I'll run it by Peter next week too, where just to have him discuss it, because we talked a little bit about this, and I think it's kind of a judgment call. I kind of like to see what Peter's call is on that, because he's pretty conservative on this stuff, and many attorneys are. Um, but the courts will, if they're protecting the association from a lawsuit or in a lawsuit, they're pretty they're going to be pretty generous in terms of allowing for those kind of closed door meetings. I think, I think if they've been that in the past, but there's got to be some tie to that litigation or to that potential litigation. So in your situation, Stanley, I think that, to me, I don't, if all it was that if it's a case that going forward, the board says, we don't have coverage on this right now, and they're going to stop the use of it completely and post it, then I think that that's not a lawsuit. That's preventing a potential lawsuit. I think that the association members have an ability or to know that, but I think probably the board has the ability to take emergency action like that for the safety. They have when it comes to common elements. The one area that the board has some latitude on is if it is a safety issue or it's a legal thing that legitimately you can, for example, technically you can't stop somebody from having a clothesline to hang their clothes out. And you say, well, there's no way in the world I want clotheslines hanging, but they're protected by federal law. So those kind of things override some of this relative to common elements, but otherwise it's they're pretty sacred.
Okay, let me ask you this. This past Sunday in the newspaper, under the question and answer condo section, there was an issue that had to do with email communications.
Yes.
And in that discussion, or in the answer that was presented, they referred to a board of 3 people, and no 2 of them could get together to discuss anything because it constituted a quorum.
Right.
And the person answering said that you could hold email communications. Now, all email communications among the board, are those privileged? What if it involves the entire board? Is that an opportunity to skirt the open meeting situation? I understand they can't vote and pass actions, but they can certainly prepare everything in anticipation of passing.
That's a good question. Okay, so that is we do have a little bit of a thing that came through now, and that allows for this email communication, and technically you can't take a vote that way. Because it's not one of the proved electronic voting systems, even if it was, all of the members. But and it's a new law, so nobody really knows for sure if there's going to be any reining in of this. But basically, what happened is, the board members, just the situation you're talking about, whether it's 2 board members, whether it's a quorum, whether it's the whole board, whatever. There doesn't appear to be anything that keeps them from discussing an issue and hitting reply all. And that information, of course, is all available. You can't hide it on your personal email and all that kind of stuff. So it's still available because it would be association records, but and they can't take a vote, but they in effect they're skirting, realistically, they're skirting the law by not having that discussion in front of the members. And that's really what's happening now is, many associations used to have workshops, even though there really is no such thing as a workshop. So what they would do to get around that is it wouldn't be the board that would call the meeting. It would be a property manager. And the property manager would call the meeting and chair the meeting. And the property manager would say, look, we're going to have this meeting. I want to get your input and all the members' input. This is just for members' input. It's not a meeting. It's not an annual meeting or anything like that. We're just trying to get some information. It's not a board meeting. and basically we're just accumulating information. That probably was, borderline whether that is a problem or not. But as long as if the property manager's just voluntarily calling a meeting, you may be able to get away with that if they're not doing it at the behest of the board. But this is the alternative to that, and it's becoming more widespread. It's going to be more widespread because it does allow, and I know I'm on a number of nonprofit boards, and we have a lot of discussions, and because we're not prohibited, we have votes that way from time to time, where we email if there's a issue that has to be discussed right away. We email it around, and we all just make sure we hit reply all and we discuss it, and that's what's going to happen. And I do. I understand the need for directors to get information, particularly as it relates to information from other directors. It's very hard for whether it's an elected official or it's a board member to go to a meeting without any background and without any without any discussion with fellow board members to see what their thoughts are. I mean, let's face it, we elect these people because we think they're going to do a good job and they can represent us. We didn't elect them because they're all knowing and all powerful. We elected them because they're good people. Maybe they have complementing skills. One of the members might be a CPA or a finance person, and one of them is, might have run a big corporation or something like that. And we think, God, these guys will work well together. And so we want them to work well together, but then we take away their ability to talk to each other. So they kind of have to make decisions in a vacuum. And I understand, we don't want a lot of closed door behind the scenes things where people work all these things out. But at the same time, we got to realize that a lot of these people, it may not be a good reason, but a lot of these people have egos and they don't want to appear a fool in front of a lot of people. And so they'll take the time to educate themselves, but then we take some of those tools away sometimes by not giving them all the information or association with other people who can provide that information. So, but to answer your question in a long way, this email thing is new and it's probably going to be allowed. The question is going to be, what's going to happen with this, Stanley, is you're going to have this situation where everybody's going to email everybody. They're going to talk about this issue. It's going to be a reply all type thing. And then at the end, they will have come to an agreement. So all the board members will say, yeah, that's good idea. Yeah, I think we should look at that. Let's do that the next board meeting. And, did they take a vote? No. But you know what's going to happen at the next board meeting? If it's not a really good board that really cares about the information process and letting the members be educated, which some of these people don't, then what's going to happen at the next board meeting is they're going to bring that topic up. There's not going to be any discussion on it. It's going to get voted on, and immediately, even if they allow the members to talk about it, they're either going to cut it off or they're going to have them talk about it after the vote's been taken. And so what'll happen is the board members are fully educated, but they didn't get an opportunity for the members to be educated. And that's what board members forget sometimes with these open meetings and the board meetings is that it's there to protect them as well. It's there to have an opportunity for the members to get educated on a topic, just like they're getting educated on a topic. And it's not fair, to do that on your own and then leave the members out. It just causes conflict down the road. Sometimes members just need to voice their opinion. And you know what? There's 6 or 7 or 8 people that are running this association. There might be somebody out there that actually knows what they're doing and it may have a good idea. So it's one of those kind of things where I'm in favor of some of those more open discussions so that your members can become educated, because just for the reason the show's here, some people just don't have that information. And they're trying to get up to speed. And once they figure out what the limitations are and the problems are, then they become much better to, it becomes a much easier subject to deal with. So anyway.
All right. Mark, I appreciate your candor and your wisdom, and you and Peter are very important to the condo community. I'll tell you that.
Well, I appreciate that, Stanley. Thank you very much. And thanks for
Thank
calling
you.
in. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. It's going to be interesting because going forward, we do have this new email thing is going to be something that's coming up. The electronic voting is going to be an issue that's coming up. It's already approved, but there's limited systems that you can use. But I understand why people are doing it, but I think it's going to lead to some. I think we're going to see some challenges on it before long because of the fact that it does make it difficult for the members to get up to speed and figure out. And usually, most of these things that end up in some sort of mediation, arbitration, litigation, a lot of times it's really just a case of somebody not really knowing what the issues were or what the boards were dealing with, and the board's not even educating the members sometimes. So we have a caller, Jim. Go ahead.
I enjoyed your last discussion. I followed it very closely. I'm on the board here in Stewart, and I've been on this one for a long time. I'm calling with a more clearly defined question. We are surrounded by associations that do not have dumpsters. We have dumpsters, and we assign them to.
Congratulations, you're now the garbage capital of the world, then, right?
Right. Well, sometimes during the high season we think we are, but
yeah.
The problem is that we have dumpsters. Waste management comes in here and picks them up, and they're quite adequate most of the year for our buildings. And of course, we pay for the dumpsters and the service and all of that. Well, we have a constant, ongoing problem with illegal dumping. People from some of the other associations, and even people who wander through here at night.
Right.
And we've discussed this over the course of several years. We've written a couple of letters to the other associations that are right next to us, asking them to ask their people to not do that. Well, we're having that kind of discussion again. And it just so happens that this director observed someone from our adjoining village come over, drop garbage in our can, and proceed on her way. The board wants me to write a letter, and I'm going to, kind of updating this issue. And I actually went over and found the vehicle from the license plate and identified the location and everything else where the person lives in our adjoining village. Now, because I want to write a letter that makes some sense, and because this is continuing to happen, I researched online what law this might come under. I mean, it's in the scheme of things, it's a small amount of things, a bag of garbage. But if you multiply that by many times, it becomes problematic for us.
Sure.
And Googling it was generally agreed that it was a form of theft of services. And that's what I would have called it as well, rather than illegal dumping. And from my looking further at Google, it kind of, and I didn't find anything in the state law that's specifically on point here, under theft of services. It kind of implied that this kind of thing would be covered by local ordinance. And I'm wondering if you know, if we're in the county, not the city, if Martin County has any ordinances on illegal dumping.
Well, of course they do, but what I have found is that in general, they don't generally enforce those kind of things within the community itself. Now there's exceptions to that, but a lot of times they leave that up to the association to enforce.
Right.
I kid, but this is a problem for the city of Stewart. The city of Stewart had an issue with people drive in to the city. There's dumpsters down there for the restaurants and stuff. They drive into the city and they dump trash in there because they can't put them in their community. So they throw it out in downtown Stewart. And Stewart has, these huge problems with the dumpsters being all full and stuff getting all over the place, and they're dirty and draw rats and all kinds of stuff. So I understand what you're saying. I don't know. This is one I think is more of a legal issue, but I would think that it's more trespassing, because that person doesn't have the authority to go to trespass on your dumpster property and put stuff there. So,
well, the dumpsters are located throughout our village in a fenced-in or hedged area,
right.
and the buildings they serve are clearly known. But they're all through roads here. I call them public easements.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all owned.
But they're still your dumpsters. I mean, technically, they're under your contract.
Yes.
And
yes,
so
they are.
And so technically, if somebody who is not in your association is putting stuff into your dumpsters, they're trespassing on your property. So
Yep.
I would think that you could enforce it with trespassing, with some sort of a trespassing restrictions, and put signs up, and there I think I think this is a question too that we'll run by Peter when he comes back next week, but because I'd like to see if there's been any kind of, I'm sure in condos there's probably got to be some case on this, and he's probably got case law on it. But
well, if there's a county ordinance, I'm kind of getting to the nub of the question. Assuming there's a county ordinance provision about this, because of the nature of it being so small in the scheme of things, I'm looking to find out whether the association board of directors, upon verification of an actual violation, can take affidavits and can file a complaint. Now, that's not that we're going to say that we're going to do that, but I'd like to be able to know that we can do that when I write this letter. And as with any kind of a complaint, I need to base it on an ordinance, in this case, I think, or a statute. Any ideas how I might go to check the county codes to see if there's an ordinance that covers theft of services or trespassing?
Well, what I would do is I would contact code enforcement at the county level and tell them what your problem is, and also there is there are illegal dumping, what you can put in a dumpster, what you're allowed to do there, and the county does have some rules on that, and that probably code enforcement would deal with that, and probably the building department as well, because a lot of this is construction debris, which requires a certain process, and it could also be hazardous material, so it also may be something that requires that you might want to talk to the fire people about at the county level.
And those particular things I'm very familiar with. Our rules and regulations, as well as the signage that we have out, make it quite clear what's supposed to go in the container and what can't.
Yeah.
And because of that, and I put in the latest revision of the rules, the reference to the county Hazmobile and the county sites and all that. So I come from a background where I've dealt with all this stuff, so I'm very familiar with it, and the board is familiar with it, and it's in our documents, our rules now. So we try to sort those things out. This complaint, more often than not, this kind of thing involves garbage.
Yeah, I know.
Being thrown in a garbage container by people who don't pay for that service.
Right. And you know what? And I know, and it's a big problem. I mean, it's a lot. People don't understand how much it actually costs the associations to take care of these issues. And how much they have to pay. And if you've got one of those dumpsters out there, you're paying by the yard, and they're not cheap, So, I might, and I think from a legal standpoint, you probably can file a complaint. But I would find out initially whether what kind of response you're going to get from the county on it. That may help you, because they may not respond to a general complaint, but they may respond through the fire department to a hazardous dumping complaint. You know what I mean? So it might be something like that, because a lot of times that's what it is. Somebody's dumping a paint can, somebody's dumping stuff that they're supposed to be taking out and not putting in their own trash. And so their own garbage people won't take it away, so they're dumping it in yours. The other thing that you might look at doing is restructuring, and maybe get a hold of Waste Management. Talk to Jeff Sabin or somebody down there, but Waste Management about there are some there are some programs. For example, Waste Management has some programs. There are some private dumping companies within the county too. But you may be able to restructure your dumpster situation so that some of them, the larger ones, are locking, and are members could have a key, just like they get a key to the pool gate or something. And
we talked about that. Yes, we've already thought about that. In fact, the board at its last meeting talked briefly about that kind of thing. And we'd have to retrofit our cans to do that. And of course, in the real world, what would happen if we issued keys? Everybody would lose them.
Right.
And the property manager would be going crazy trying to answer calls about missing keys. So dealing with the human nature end of it, we kind of thought that was not going to work.
Now it is, but like I said, if you had a combination of those things, because very few times do people need to. For example, I had a home in the Pine Ridge community over in Martin Downs, and it's a pretty large community over there, and they use regular. They use regular recycling garbage cans, the kind that the truck can pick up, and we
have those.
Yeah, and there's like that, and so as a result, I mean, they don't have any of the big dumpsters. Now that's a problem, because if you've got even any kind of small amount of construction trash, you're doing some remodeling or pulling some stuff out or whatever, there's no place to throw it. You're going to try to, if you don't have a truck, and the community doesn't allow trucks, so you can't take it you can't get it out. You got to pay somebody to come get your garbage, which is kind of ironic. But anyway, like I say, I know the city of Stewart is, they're solving their problems by, they're building some, which is going to cost some money, but they're going to build some, a little attractive buildings that the dumpster will be inside. And, you can kind of get in there, but you can't get in there easy unless you've got, some key access or some sort of additional access that they can get in, so they don't have as many outside people that are dumping trash.
Do you know if the city, and I guess I can call the city and they tell me, but do you know if the city has ever caught anybody dumping stuff in, and more likely that would be demo waste or hazardous waste that would really rise to their level of concern. But has the city ever caught anybody and charged them with illegal dumping?
I think probably onto city-owned land they have. In other words, people are dumping stuff just onto property, but onto just into a dumpster, a city dumpster, probably not. I mean, they might, if they caught them, they might issue them a ticket, that type of thing. It would be one of those kind of things where it would be enforced through some sort of immediate citation through the code enforcement or parking people, probably. But I hate to say it, but the issue is one that it's just not. It's not a large enough dollar amount of problem for anybody to legally deal with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even just filing a complaint, unless you've got somebody who knows how to do that and all of that kind of thing. And then, like I said, the counties and cities aren't likely to take action on it, because it doesn't impact them directly, and they just don't have time for it. But now, my practical answer would be to find out what the person dumped, pull it out of the dumpster, follow them back to their house, and dump it on their porch.
I've done that. I've caught people, not this time around, but in past times, I've actually caught people at our dumpster. And as a board member, in our documents or in our minutes, we've authorized ourselves to enforce things that we see, violations. And I went right up to them and I said, "You got two choices. You can take that back to your village, or you're going to get fined." Now, I didn't have the authority to say that, but they didn't know that, so they took it right out and took it away.
Yeah, that's. I would have just told them, look, you obviously lost this. Here it is back. You need to lose this somewhere else. So,
I know.
But yeah, I this is one of those ones that I think you probably can take some of the action you're talking about, and there probably are, like I said, someplace in code enforcement, the most likely. But but at the same time, and like I said, I would have some discussions with whoever your garbage collection carrier is, to see what alternatives they might have,
Right.
because there are, like I said, that they may have some alternatives that will that will keep you from having that problem.
All right. Well, I will take those leads, and I thank you for them.
Yeah.
And
No problem. And call back again next week if you want. See if we'll see if Peter remind me, and we'll see if Peter had any if he's got any garbage issues that have come up. I'll bet you he has. He probably knows case law, so we can.
Well, that would be helpful, and I will call back next Monday and follow up. In the meantime, I've got to craft this letter and try to make it sound officious, and we'll see where it goes.
I would now understand that most people don't take my advice, so I would put that letter on association stationery, and then stick it in a paint can and drop it off next door at wherever that person is. Say, here you go.
However, that's the informal way of solving the problem.
That's the informal way of solving the problem. So anyway, all
right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the call, Jim. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right. It is great questions this morning, and it's interesting because and I know those are the type of questions we're talking about. We didn't need to know the specific association, but those are common problems that we see across associations. It's pretty common issues, and they're problems, and that's kind of why we're here, is to kind of air those out and talk about them. Sometimes we have good legal ways to go. Others sometimes it's just a practical approach, but it's interesting that that in general we have a lot of those issues. The discussions or the situations are such that you don't think about these things when you have a home in a single family home that you're not in an association or whatever. You got to worry about your own trash, and you worry about what's going on with it, but it's not a big deal. And maybe you haul it out to the dump when you have to haul it out to the dump or whatever. But here you've got an association maybe that's got 40 dumpsters or 20 dumpsters, and that's expensive process. And it's generally based on the amount of trash that you're using and the size that you have available, and that gets that gets expensive. It becomes a huge portion of the budget if you're doing that. And many associations, in an effort to control that, have downsized. And just like Jim's association has, they have some smaller garbage pails and stuff, so that they don't have to, so that they're not paying quite as much for these big dumpsters. And then the other thing is the construction debris is expensive, and it is required to be hauled off. You can't just, you've normally got to have a dumpster for that kind of thing, and you've got to. That's one of the costs of having that done is to have that dumpster so that it can be hauled off in a construction dumpster. Frankly, that's what I had to do with my unit out in Pine Ridge that I was talking about when we had some major construction to do in the unit, and we basically had to get one of the places. We got Eddie Huggins' company to bring in a dumpster, and we hauled off the construction debris. But there's some cost to that. So, and the members shouldn't pay that cost. It's not fair to the other members to charge them for all of that. Sure, if we all have a little bit of stuff, that's what I was talking about. If you got a little bit of debris now and then, you're not doing something major, you're pulling out some stuff and throwing it away. Yeah, then it's good to have at least one dumpster on your property that you can put some of those larger items in. But it's not fair to be completely remodeling your condo and throwing all your trash on common property and making all your neighbors pay for it. So that's kind of a different approach. I wanted to jump back a little bit to Stanley's issue with I do want to let people know that that has been some loosening up of email communication and electronic communication. Uh, I know many people are not. There's a thought process that many of the people in the condos, that we're all older and we don't use all those fancy electronic stuff. But the fact of the matter is, most of us do now. And in fact, we may prefer it. I mean, right now, I prefer emails because I can get them on my phone. I don't have to be in the office. I prefer text because I get those right away and can look at them after the fact. And I use my cell phone pretty prevalently, and for all kinds of communication. So it's in some respects, I'm glad that we're getting into an electronic age because it makes it a lot easier to deal with things and with communication. And it makes it easier for the associations to manage when they can communicate. Stuff doesn't blow up into a problem. The more electronic the communication, the better that that it is, I think, in terms of avoiding more expensive problems. If I know, for example, in my case, the only association dues that I don't pay on time are the ones that don't get paid electronically, because I got to remember to cut a check and then get it over to the association. So the ones that are electronic, they're scheduled in, boom, they go, and no problem, So we do have, we are an electronic age, and some of that stuff is coming up. But this thing with the boards and the reply all type situation, I hope that as a board member, you're not going to abuse that process. I mean, at least if you're having a discussion, hopefully it's an open discussion that people can participate in and they can see what was discussed. You're keeping those emails and have that information available, and that you're not making your decisions. Hopefully we'll use that email train to really just discuss the issue, but not come to conclusions. And as a board member, I just say, please try not to come to conclusions. Give your members the opportunity to get educated as well, because in the long run, you'll have a better community because they will be educated and understand what the problems you face are, and they'll try to help you with those. So thanks for joining us here. Join us again next Monday at 9 o'clock right here on WSTU Digital 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.